Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum.
And here they come, and Indiana got to him. Sack.
Indiana football.
Oh, what a tremendous grab. Hoosiers are threatening at the 3-yard line.
Nothing beats game day in Bloomington. So get your Indiana football tickets now and be at family-friendly Memorial Stadium as the Hoosiers take on Connecticut on September 21st. Adult tickets are as low as $20.
And as always, youth tickets are just $10.
Visit IUHoosiers.com for more information.
He's down to the 15, the 10, the 5, touchdown! How about that?
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, we're joined by Dustin Dopirak from The Athletic as we continue our tour around the Big Ten to talk about Purdue. Dustin covers Purdue, Indiana, and Butler for The Athletic, so he's able to provide a really unique perspective on the Boilermakers, what to expect from them coming up this season as they lose Carson Edwards and Ryan Klein and Grady Eifert. And we also talk about what are some of the differences right now between the two programs, between Indiana and Purdue, and I think Dustin has a lot of insight to offer there. And then we end with a discussion about Joey Brunk, who Dustin saw while covering Butler, and what Indiana fans should expect from Brunk this year on the court. We've heard a lot about the leadership. We dive in a little bit more to what we can expect from him as a player. So all of that coming this week on Podcast on the Brink. Let's get right to it. Here's our discussion with Dustin Dopirak. All right, and we are joined this week on Podcast on the Brink by Dustin Dopirak, who covers Indiana, Purdue, and Butler for The Athletic. Dustin, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Ready for basketball season to start? It's coming. Just a few weeks. Well, how many weeks until practice starts?
Like what, next week, right? 24th is the first practice.
Yeah, it's coming. Okay.
Yeah, coming up fast. So is that 1 week from yesterday? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. 1 week from yesterday. I mean, I guess it feels weird because it's not like the old days where it was, Midnight Madness and something you could circle on the calendar, and it was about the same time every year and everything, and it sort of made sense in the basketball in the sports calendar. Now it's practice just never really ends. It just becomes more frequent.
So the main purpose in having you on this week is to talk about Purdue. We're doing our, off-season kind of tour around the Big Ten, talk about some of the contenders. We will talk about Indiana a little bit as well. But let's start out with the Boilermakers because, as I kind of look at them, to me, like they're one of the hardest teams to project. Like if you told me right now that Purdue's going to finish second in the conference, I wouldn't be shocked. And if you told me they finished 7th or 8th, I wouldn't be shocked, and I think they're getting some of the benefit of the doubt because of what Matt Painter has done over the last 4 or 5 years, even though they lost a lot of leadership, a lot of scoring. Right. So maybe start out, if you could, by kind of making both arguments. Like, why will Purdue, maybe finish, 2nd, 3rd, 4th in the conference? And why are some of the naysayers who really think this could be the year they drop off, why do they have a good point?
Yeah, I think to make the positive point, I think the big thing that they have is, they have experienced guys. They did lose 3 starters, but the next 7 guys in the rotation are all there, and including I think you'd have to argue 2 of the best defensive players in the Big Ten in Nojel Eastern and Matt Harms. I would say that Eastern is one of those guys. He's 6'7", 225, and a point guard. He can literally defend just about anybody on the floor. You don't want him against necessarily a really big 5-man, but he can handle that in a switch if he has to. He's going to be able to guard really good wings. He can absolutely handle point guards. Just an exceptional defender. And Matt Harms led the league in block shots last season, 7'3", as good as a rim protector as you're going to have. So those guys are, they're pretty steady presences. They've been around 2 Sweet 16 teams, one of them being an Elite 8 team, and teams that have finished 2 and then 1 in the Big Ten so far. So they know how to win. So you've got 2 guys that kind of give you a core right there. And then a bunch of other players who are ready to step up and see some more minutes. Aaron Wheeler being a 6'9", 200-pound wing who can hit threes. I think Eric Hunter has a chance to be better. I mean, he's a guy that finished 7th all time in Indiana high schools in scoring. Obviously, was at a Class A school, so that helps the cause a little bit. But as a guy that can prove he can put the ball in, is proven at that level he can put the ball in the bucket. Was at least steady for them last year when he got to play. Sasha Stefanovic, a guy that can shoot. Evan Boudreau, who's a guy who can play and give you something. And they've got a pretty good freshman class. All Indiana kids who had pretty good careers. Brandon Newman is a guy that I think is going to be able to really score at the Big Ten level. Isaiah Thompson, I think, is a guy that you're hearing. From the Purdue camp, basically, that they think he's more ready to play than you would think. As a kid that came in at 150 pounds, but can hit deep threes and can defend you, for 94 feet, basically, can get after a point guard the whole way. And Mason Gillis is, I think, a guy that they really like. Missed all of last year at Newcastle after knee surgery, so he's still figuring out how healthy he's going to be, or how much rust he has to shake off. But he's a guy. He's a really good rebounder, really skilled guy that also just plays tough and is going to be just an interesting Big Ten player. So they've got a lot of pieces and they got a lot of experience. And I think, after having seen the sort of alchemy that Matt Painter was able to put together last year, having lost 4 starters and having, this explosive guard who also has a giant ego and trying to satiate that with a bunch of guys that were going to basically defer, but also hit the shots they were given and sort of fill their roles and try to make it work. That you had a bunch of guys that were sort of willing to get in line with that. It makes all the cases just because there's not necessarily, other than Michigan State, which I think is the team that everybody presumes is going to run away with this thing. I don't know that anybody else is that steady. I don't know that anybody else has a higher floor other than Michigan State. So obviously the naysayer point is who scores the points. Ryan Klein and Carson Edwards made up for, I think, 47% of the points on last year's squad. You throw Grady Eifert in there, and it's somewhere like 54, 55. They led the league in 3-pointers. Those 3 guys made up for 77% of those. I just did the math on that last night for something. So they have to sort of reshape and reconsider who they're going to be. They're not going to be able to score like they did. They were the 4th most efficient offense in all of college basketball last year. It's impossible to really imagine that still being the case with the group they've got. They got to figure out who puts the ball in the bucket. Obviously, they went and got a grad transfer on Jahaad Proctor, who averaged 19 a game at High Point, but that's at High Point. What is that going to translate to? Even if it's, I think he'll be able to average double figures in the Big Ten, but is that closer to 12 or 13? I don't know that he's a guy that gets you close to 20 in the Big Ten. So who else gets you points? No Joe Eastern cannot shoot. Hasn't been able to shoot, has to learn to at least get some semblance of a 3-point shot. But he's not even as far along as Victor Oladipo was as a freshman and sophomore. Vic could occasionally hit the open one. No Joe didn't even shoot last year. He took 4 threes all year. Mostly got his offense from posting up and getting offensive rebounds. So, he's a key guard who's going to play all the time because that he's that good a defender. You got to figure out how he's going to score the basketball. That there's a lot there to try to figure out. They want to play Travion Williams more. They'd like to be able to put Travion and Matt Harms together. And he's apparently worked really hard in getting to be, get closer to a power forward's body. Was running a 5:39 mile at some point in that summer for a 280-pound guy. That's crazy fast. But all the same, he was still, just looking at him running that as fast as he must have been running that. They showed a little bit of video on Purdue's Twitter account. But he still didn't look 250 or 240 or 230. So is he a guy that can go out and defend on the perimeter that you have to do as a power forward these days? So it's a question of, what does their lineup even look like? How are they going to get baskets? How much are they going to have to rely on freshmen? How much are the guys that were on the bench last year going to be able to actually step up and be more effective in their roles? Very difficult to try to guess that right now. So you can't say, all right, that's a team that's definitely a top 3 team in the Big Ten. I think there's a high floor. I think just for the sake of having solid guys that are going to defend and not turn the ball over, they're going to be like your classic, Wisconsin team. They're not necessarily going to play that style, but one of those Bo Ryan teams that even if they lost everybody, they were going to find a way to be top 6 in the Big Ten and get in the tournament. I think that's the floor for Purdue, is just because they've got many student guys that are going to be okay. But the realm of what's possible, the ceiling of what's possible isn't nearly as high when you lose a guy that was as explosive as Carson Edwards was.
Dustin, you mentioned him a little bit, but I'd like to maybe go a little bit more in depth on Proctor, who transferred in from High Point, I believe it was. And the one thing I've, now covering the Big Ten, 11, whatever years it is, there's been a lot, the last 5 or 6 years of guys who have grad transferred in from, maybe to mid to low major level and haven't exactly translated. I don't know if it's because of the jump up in competition, but one guy that kind of I remember from a few years ago, Jerod Simmons, this may have been back before you were on the beat, transferred into Michigan, and there was huge expectations for him, and he barely even got off the bench after having really good numbers at the MAC level. I'm curious kind of what are realistic expectations for Proctor, and is there I guess what can you tell us kind of about his style of play? Because a lot of times you see guys put up these numbers, but it's not really done in an efficient fashion. I was looking at his field goal percentage. I think was something like 46%, which I guess is solid, but I don't know how that translates to the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, he's definitely solid, but it's not enough. You don't look at it and say, wow, those numbers are crazy. He's not shooting 50% from the field. I think he shot 36% from three. He can score at all three levels, so that's important. I think that can translate him. He's obviously pretty sturdy at 6'3", 205, so he's going to be able to, get into the paint and finish against contact. He's at least solidly built enough to do that. He's got, pretty good handle, pretty good ability, again, understanding of angles, stuff like that. Apparently his biggest strength is the pull-up game, is mid-range pull-up game. So that's important. He can shoot the three well enough. Like I said, but he was shooting really well toward the end of last year. I guess he had some kind of hand issue or arm issue or something like that he was kind of battling through all year, and he sort of got past it toward the end of last season. You see his 3-point numbers got better towards the finish. So he's got all the ability, like he can do everything you need him to do. And again, because they don't have that guy, I mean, they recruited him out of desperation. So that it wasn't just a case of, well, he's on the market, let's take a flyer, let's see if you can beat one of its guys out. It's, hey, we don't have a shooting guard, so we really need to get him, basically. And that's how Purdue looked at it, was this is a necessity, that this isn't something that we can afford to not get. We cannot afford to not get a graduate transfer guard who's going to be able to play right away and score right away, because, we've lost all of these points. And someone has to make up for them, and you don't see Sasha Stefanovic being the starting two guard. So by virtue of necessity, he's going to be, it's his starting job to lose, basically. I mean, I think the only guy who could realistically beat him, a scenario I can imagine, is Brandon Newman would have to come in there and just knock his socks off. That's I think the only way that Proctor is not the starting shooting guard is Newman would have to step up and be the guy, and they would have to fill in from there. I mean, I think Newman could still, I think, win the starting job at 3, and somebody else would have to win that job, and they would have to fill in, and it'd be a situation where the best lineup they have is Brandon Newman playing the 2, and that would bring Proctor off. Proctor would have to come off the bench, and then obviously you wouldn't see that great of scoring numbers, and he would be more of an afterthought in that case. But I think just, again, out of sheer experience, out of the fact that he's a grown man at 22. Already has his degree, obviously as a grad transfer, he's a father. I mean, like this, he's a grown dude, basically he is, he's built like a grown guy. I mean, like Brandon Newman, I think is pretty strong for his size. I mean, I think he's going to, I think he's going to be a really good player. But again, just by virtue of the fact that he's almost definitely going to have to start, and someone has to get the ball, especially early in late clock situations. Nogel Eastern's not a guy you want to have the ball in his hands. Basically they've got bigs they can get the ball to. Aaron Wheeler's not really a creator, so if he's starting at the 4, like obviously you want him to get him the ball in the corner and give him a shot to hit threes, but he's not a guy that's going to make a lot of things happen off the dribble. He's right now the guy that you look at and say he's their best chance to be able to shoot from 3, pull up, or be able to take the ball to the rim. He's the one guy that you could say that could do all 3 of those things and do them effectively. So he has to be. Basically, they have to get points out of him. Again, is he going to be super efficient? I mean, I can't say looking at him right now. It's one of those deals where you got to see him play some people at the Big Ten level. Again, he's shown he can score at just about every level he's been at. He didn't score a lot as a freshman in Iona. But again, he did a bunch the last 2 years at High Point. He was a big time scorer at Harrisburg High School in Pennsylvania. He's playing some pretty good competition there as a high school player. So again, it should translate to some extent, but again, I can't see you being able to pencil in 20 a game for him, like you were able to last year, playing for High Point.
Every year, Dylan Burkhardt, who runs UM Hoops, and I put together a list of the top 25 Big Ten players through the year. As you know, it's a highly scientific process doing that. But this year, one of the guys we left off, and we talked a little bit about this as we went through the process of guys that we thought maybe didn't deserve to be on right now, but at the end of the season could see them being on the list, and that was Aaron Wheeler of Purdue. Are you on board for a breakout year for him, and what do you want to see next from him in terms of his game?
It could definitely happen, and I think you saw a lot of good things out of him towards the end of the year, especially in the tournament. He had 10 rebounds in about 35 minutes in the Sweet 16 in Elite Eight between the Tennessee game and the Virginia game, and that's going to go up against some pretty big dudes, that he was dealing with, trying to grab rebounds against those guys, and showed more of an ability to get his hands in some passing lanes and make some things happen defensively. Keep some guys in front of him. And that's really critical. I mean, if he can, stay on the floor defensively, that gives him a real chance. Again, he's a really good shooter, for a kid his size. He's got some athleticism. He's absolutely going to get, is getting better and better in transition. Really, fast kid for his size. Was always a pretty skilled player. I mean, he grew kind of later. Was a little bit of late bloomer physically, so he's sort of used to being able to, handle the ball and pass it. You haven't seen it work out that great so far. I think he only had maybe 15 assists last year against maybe 24, 25 turnovers. So he's got, for him to really make a next level leap, it doesn't necessarily have to be a dynamite off the dribble that he's crossing people up or anything like that, but he's got to be at least be able to create his own. I think that's a big thing. If it not just be able to find him, he's got to be able to, get the ball in his hand and create his own shot, at least to some extent. Again, doesn't necessarily have to be able to, be Edwards where he's knifing into the lane and, crossing up 3 or 4 people on the way there. That's not, I don't think he was going to be at. He's just too big to be able to do that. But at least be able to maybe get a jab step and get some space, stuff like that he doesn't have to be uncontested or, can create some space for himself to get some more shots. I think that's kind of the biggest thing is if he can do that and just play as more of a 3 type. I mean, basically is the way they worked the offense last year. You saw a lot of dribble weave, dribble handoff type of stuff to create, angles and work guys off of screens for Klein and Edwards. I mean, if you can put him in that role, he becomes a lot more dangerous. So he's not just a stretch 4, but can play a little bit of a 3 and can move around a little bit more. I think that allows him. That would really be pushing. I think him. I think he can be effective if all he is a stretch 4. If all he is playing those kind of minutes, I mean, I think he can be a pretty good player doing that. But again, if he can handle a little bit, that really I think ups his value a whole lot, especially the way that they're with what they have in that offense, what's available for a guy playing that position.
Dustin, what stylistic differences do you expect from Purdue this year offensively? Because last year I thought they were one of the most fun offenses to watch. And you mentioned some of the shooting, but so much of that was predicated on the gravity of that guys like Carson Edwards and Ryan Klein had, where you could create spacing, and you always had a guy in Carson Edwards that could bail you out, and they're not going to have that. So how much different are they going to look offensively this year?
I mean, it could be a whole lot. I think again, if they want to, I mean, Matt Painter said straight up when I talked to him in July, that they would like to play Travion Williams and Matt Harms a lot together. And that obviously means you're looking at a 2-post sort of high-low type of look, which is
those IU Purdue games are going to be classic battles with 2 big men in there, man. It's going to be old school.
I know. So it looks a lot more like you're sort of used to seeing historically from Purdue, but really haven't seen in this, I wouldn't go so far as to say in this era, because obviously they played Swanigan and Haas together. So it could look more like that. Now, neither one of these guys, Travion Williams isn't Caleb Swanigan and Matt Harms isn't Isaac Haas. I mean, they're differently built humans. But, they'll be able to move a little bit. I mean, in that case, you might have Travion defending the 4, but playing the 5 on offense. And that's probably what it would be. That's I think how it would be. And Harms would be, the opposite. But I think if it goes that way, if that's the type of style they have to play, that might be the best thing for him. Because again, I mean, Travion Williams was, when he was really good last year, was really efficient. His rebound rates are off the charts. And he's able again to really set himself up in the low block. He believes in himself as a perimeter guy. Which is interesting. I guess he always used to be able to shoot threes and felt, was really proud of himself as a passer and wants to be able to show that. We brought that, that fact up to Matt Painter in about December, January, and Painter just sort of shrugged it off. And now he's sort of embracing it because he's saying, all right, how do I find a way to put these guys on the floor together? Maybe I can use both of them at the 4, use both of them at the 5 and make that offense work. So again, that becomes an entirely different style than they played a year ago. They were never posting up 2 guys a year ago. Certainly Grady Eifert was their starting power forward. He's 6'6". And, if if he's any bigger than Ryan Klein, it's not by much. So that's going to be a very different style. Again, like you said, I mean, there's not a guy like Carson Edwards that you could just spread the floor and say, Carson, go run up the middle and see who collapses and figure out, where to throw the ball, or just take it to the rim and finish on somebody. Carson was one of the fastest guys I've ever seen with the basketball. As much as he seemed more of a fan of taking 35-foot threes. If he got a guy one-on-one, I mean, he was just vicious. It was one dribble go, and he could just fly by people with the ball in his hand. So he could either finish or find guys if he wanted to, and he usually didn't want to pass the ball, but all the same, he could do it if he wanted to. So that is just a huge element that's lost, and there's so much that becomes less effective when you're not able to do that. But there are going to be pieces. I mean, I think, again, a really key question is going to be, what can No Gel Eastern do? Because if you're putting Williams and Harms on the floor at the same time, you're not also posting up No Gel Eastern. You're not putting three guys on the block and say, go get your points by trying to post people up. So that obviously clogs the lane and makes it difficult for everybody to work. So they can't have that. He's not going to be a guy that's going to shoot a ton of threes, but he's got to shoot enough to be able to bring defenders out to him, so that when he, if he even just wants to get out of the way on a possession, he's got to be able to bring his defender out there and that guy not sag all the way into the paint. And when he gets the ball in the perimeter, he's got to be able to bring a guy out so that he can dribble past him. I mean, I think he's got the ability to get to the rim on somebody, but I mean, he's seeing gigantic cushions because nobody thinks he's going to shoot. If he gets the ball in the perimeter, nobody's coming out to guard him there, and he's got to be able to at least create enough space that way, and again, drag his defender out the perimeter to be able to do that. They lose a lot of possibility if Eastern can at least, again, bring his defender, force his guy to defend him out to the 3-point line. That's going to be really critical for them to find some spacing. But again, I think there are some other guys that can make some plays. Just on that roster, again, I'll be very interested how Newman can play. Proctor can play. I'd be interested to see if Eric Hunter can make a leap, and you see something closer to what you saw at Tinley Prep. And we got to see one practice in about June, earlier this year, and he seemed a lot more explosive, I think, than he had been. He's certainly trying to put a lot of weight on him. He came in around 155, 160. It looks like a cross country runner, and that's just not going to do it in the Big Ten. Basically, it's going to be difficult for him to be able to just keep position when he goes through and be able to stay on line and finish through contact. He's got to be able to do that, and that's going to require him to put some weight on. I think he's eating a lot. Like when you see some of these kids that really have to put weight on, they're eating like 5 times a day, carrying around protein shakes wherever they go. It's just not easy for your body to process that. I think that was something that he was dealing with last year, was trying to find ways of putting weight on. And it doesn't come that fast. And again, you still just feel like you're carrying around a lot more than you are. And even he probably feels heavier now than he will when he's 170, 175, just because he's processing that much food, protein, whatever. So I'll be interested to see if he makes a move. But a lot of it is going to be very interesting to see how this offense shapes itself, and it really comes down to personnel and who fits where.
Dustin, you have a really unique perspective, seeing Indiana up close, seeing Purdue up close. And obviously, one program, you've got a guy who's been there 14, 15 years, has been through some ups and downs, has his program installed. At Indiana, you've got a guy who's entering his 3rd season, still kind of trying to find his footing. What are the biggest differences between the two programs right now when you see them up close? And how does, maybe that difference in just the amount of time that they've had a chance to be there and install their program manifest itself?
I think it's really crystallized in some of the quotes that Matt Painter had after, I think, Purdue won that first game, and he said, you've got to grow old and stay old. And, he seemed to be, I wouldn't go so far as to say lecturing Archie, but he definitely seemed, I think, to be expressing, I think, the freedom that you get with, when you've had patience, but when you've got stability, and when the people in charge of your program trust you, and they sort of just are willing to say, put it in your hands, and create the program the way that you would like to create it. And he and I sort of talked later about what he really meant by that and how he's able to make that happen. And he also talked to the rest of the press about this as well, but just said, if you look at that period, where they kind of fell off a little bit after the Robbie Humble, Jawan Johnson era, they had a couple bad years in there, and what they had done was go get basically the best Indiana players they could go get, the Teron Johnsons, Ronnie Johnsons of the world. They weren't getting Cody Zeller necessarily, but they were getting sort of the next level of guy at Indiana, and especially they were able to really compete, especially with players from Indianapolis and North. And, those teams didn't perform very well. They weren't very skilled. They turned the ball over. They didn't shoot it very well. And Matt Painter kind of had an epiphany at that point. He said, why am I sort of making this big point out of, defending territory and being so concerned about geography and feeling like, okay, well, I'm Purdue. This is the player in Indiana I have to go get. And now that we're winning, we have to get better players from the state. Why don't I just go get the players I want? Why don't I get to go get the players that play the style I want to play and have the skills I want? And, so that means, why don't I go just, instead of trying to get the best shooter in Indiana or get the best player I want in Indiana, why don't I go get the best shooter in the Midwest? And whoever that happens to be, whoever I think is the best spot up shooter in the Midwest, I'm going to go try to get him. And, at the time, that was Dakota Mathias. That was one of the first guys he sort of focused on and said, okay, this is an Ohio kid, but, and maybe he's a little bit slow, but you know what? He can shoot the heck out of it. And that's what I need. I need guys that can shoot it. And, we really started focusing on that, on guys that could dribble, pass, and shoot, instead of thinking of where's he from, where's he related, where's he rated, how athletic is he? That's really, I think, the biggest thing that he started to focus on was skill over athleticism, being less concerned about guys who can jump high and even guys who can move fast, believing he'd be able to turn them into decent enough defenders if he worked with them enough. Because obviously your concern is, if you're just looking at skills, guys that can dribble, pass, and shoot, where are they athletic enough? Can they guard a more athletic wing if that's where you have him playing? If he's a catch and shoot three, can he play the defense? And, he able to managed to make it so Mathias could. They really worked hard on that. Said, okay, if you take these guys that can do that and you work hard enough, they will be able to defend. And, that's the kind of group he's built, is a bunch of skilled players. Go get a Ryan Klein. Again, he's from Indianapolis, but say, I don't know what else he can do, but he can darn sure shoot it. We'll figure out what else we can do with him. We'll make him serviceable enough. We need guys who can do this. And that's what his class looks like, this year coming in. Newman, Gillis, Thompson, they can all shoot the heck out of it. So that's what he started to look at, is skill over athleticism. And the thing is, if you're established, if you've won that much, you can do that. You don't have to go get the highest player in your state, because you don't have to be concerned with everybody's going to be saying about you if you don't get him, and how, what negative recruiting comes around. You say, like, if you're a Painter, you can just say, I'm going to go get my guys. Everyone trusts I'm going to win at this point. No one's going to complain that I didn't go get Romeo Langford or Trace Jackson Davis. It's not going to bother anybody. No one's going to say, well, what's wrong with Matt Painter? He said, I think, when you don't get the best players in your state, people think you've got a disease, or there's something wrong with you. But when you win, they don't. When you win consistently, they don't. And, Archie Miller is still in the case where he has to go get the best player in the state, because otherwise people say, well, what's wrong with Archie Miller? Because he hasn't established a style of play yet. He hasn't established, he hasn't become an established winner enough yet that he cannot go pursue those guys, that he can just say, I'm getting my players. I don't care where they're from. I don't care how they're related, how they're rated. I don't care how much the fan base wants them. He still has to go get the guys that Indiana wants. Now, in this upcoming class in 2020, it just so happens that I think the sort of players he needs to get a foundation happen to be some of the best players in the state. When you talk about Anthony Leo, obviously they desperately need a shooter. So, it sort of, begs the question of why it even took that long for them to offer, when you've got a clear and obvious problem and a clear and obvious solution 3 miles away from your campus, or even less than that, in terms of where the campus edge is compared to where Bloomington South is. Like, he was an obvious fit. And Trey Galloway, I think, is another guy, again, that is sort of one of those core foundational pieces that maybe any program would like to have, because he can defend so much. He's a tough kid. There's so many pieces, so many things that he can do. So it happens that in the state, there's two guys that really fit that. And again, obviously, they need some big-time guys to change the narrative as well. They needed to go after a Romeo Langford. They needed to go after a Trace Jackson Davis. But again, like, is he in a position right now where he goes and gets a kid from Ohio who can just shoot it, and that's okay? Probably not. Jordan Geronimo, I think, is more palatable because he can jump, because he's athletic as he is. That's going to be able to sell. He's got some highlight reel stuff that you can say, okay, well, this is why, we're going to get him. And there's some additions there, or things that help there. But I think he does, Archie Miller still does have to throw his hat in the ring with blue chip guys like Caleb Love. Even if you're not going to go get him, you've got to be at least part of that discussion. So you look like a blue blood. You're operating like a blue blood. Matt Painter does not have to try to compete with Kentucky on anybody. He doesn't have to do it. He doesn't have to get in that muck at all. And he can still, trust that he's going to be able to put together a system that wins. They're just not in the same place. And, and Archie Miller just flat out cannot listen to that advice from Matt Painter. He has to a certain degree, but he can't all the way. I mean, he has to be able to be concerned about perception and selling the program. He's got to be able to go sell that, he can go get big time players and beat out big time programs to get those guys.
Dustin, you mentioned Michigan State earlier as being obviously the clear-cut favorite to win the Big Ten, but after that, I think it's pretty wide open from about 2 to 10 or 11, I would say. I think a lot of people are high on Maryland. I'm not necessarily sure that I'm in that camp. I think I kind of like Ohio State as potentially the second best team. Who were, if you were giving the Dustin Dopirak preseason Big Ten power rankings, who are the teams that you have right there in that mix right after Michigan State?
Yeah, that's the thing. Maryland, it's like by virtue of having Callan and Smith and some other talented guys, like you almost feel obligated to put them up there, but you also sort of believe that they're just going to find a way not to meet expectations, just because they haven't, typically. And, again, that Maryland team that they had last year should have been better than it was. Bruno Fernando was just physically a freak, and then you have Callan. So that team should have been better than it was. I think should have been more competitive than it was, and it was still good, but it just should have been better. So, I'd almost have to slot them 2 right now just because, but I don't think they're going to finish there. I think Illinois. I actually absolutely think Ohio State has a really good chance. They've recruited a bunch of good guys. I think there's enough remaining pieces coming back, and I think Holtman's a really good coach. So I do think Ohio State has a good chance of being a big time contender there. I don't love the way Illinois plays, but I really like Io. I just do. I think he's just a terrific player, and I think him sticking around and playing his sophomore year gives them a chance. I think there's enough guys, and Yorgi, however you pronounce his name, is again a terrific big. I think they've got enough pieces. I think the over aggression on defense, I don't think really served them well. I mean, I think it really played to Indiana's hands more than any other team they played last year. They were really able to take advantage of that, of somebody playing man pressure, really put them in Indiana in the best position it could, because it could beat, Romeo can beat people off the dribble. They found different ways and Jawan certainly can beat people up. And they looked really good against Illinois last year. They looked better against Illinois than maybe anybody I saw them look, because Illinois puts himself in that position. It's a little bit of all or nothing defensively. But again, I just think there's enough talent there that you've got to consider them somewhere in there. I presume Michigan will be okay. I don't think they'll be great. They obviously lost a lot. I mean, but there's, I think, a lot of pieces, a number of guys that didn't get to play a lot because of the amount of talent they had on that starting 5 last year. That are going to get a chance. Maybe they're going to be a little bit better. I mean, I think there may be a top 5 team in the league still. Even with a different coach. Even with Juwan Howard, there's certainly going to be a change of pace with Beeline gone. But I think there's still enough talent there for them to be pretty good. Wisconsin loses a good bit. Losing Hap, obviously that seems to knock them down a peg. I think Purdue will be in there, just again by virtue of having a pretty experienced group. Minnesota might not be terrible. They might be okay. I don't know. It's very wide open. Who might
the 2 weird ones right now for me, and I've seen all over the place. I've seen Iowa picked as high as 4th, which to me is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And another team that right now, Andy Katz has his preseason bracket out, which is obviously just for the fun of it, but he has Penn State in the bracket, which to me is kind of head scratching considering Pat Chambers has been there, 8 or 9 years and has never made the tournament. To project them to make the tournament, it's almost like, all right, show me you're going to make it before I actually predict that you're going to.
Yeah, no, I mean, it moves a couple clicks that way. I mean, Stevens is a heck of a player. I think that kind of keeps you in it. Again, like having one guy that's that experienced and that you can trust, I think. And there's a couple other pieces there. I'm just trying to, imagine in my mind who all is coming back on that roster. There's a couple pieces that are okay. I could see them finishing in the top half of the league. I don't think they're a conference contender. But Big Ten can get 8 teams in the league. So if they're 8th place in the league, they can get in. Absolutely.
So where do you slot Indiana among all those teams?
I mean, right now you put him at 10th or 11th. I mean, I don't know. It's possible for them to get a lot better. But that's a case of there's a lot I want to see before I trust Indiana. There's a lot. I want to know if Jerome Hunter is going to come back. I mean, that raises the ceiling a lot. If Hunter is back and can play 25 minutes a game, then you've got a different team. If Trace Jackson Davis is an all Big Ten player right out of the gate, right out of the chute, I mean, like, he's not a flawless player. I don't think he's a one and done. But if he's an all Big Ten player on any of the three teams out of the gate, they're a lot better. But like, you got to look at it. Devontae Green is going to be their starting shooting guard, and Devontae Green is going to be a focal point of the offense. So take that, digest it, consider it, think, all right. Now that doesn't mean he can't do really well. He can be explosive at times. He can get the ball to the rim. He can shoot really deep threes. So if he finds some level of balance between aggression and, just is a little bit smarter with the ball, is a little bit smarter when he's in position. If Rob Finney makes a leap too, and you have those two guys playing together, well, I think they're going to actually have some pretty good chemistry because Finney really respects Devontae. And I think those guys can fit together well, especially that I do think Finney in that case does need to be a little bit more assertive so that, Devontae's just not taking the ball from him and running with it. They've got a chance to get a lot better than that projection. I mean, those things really have to come a long way. I do think, having two solid bigs in Davis and Brunk makes a difference. That could help them out. But you've got Justin Smith as another wild card. If Justin Smith is going to give you 15, 20 good minutes, you become a lot better. He's got a lot of potential athletically, can be a really good defender. If he's going to be clueless again and you're not going to be able to put the ball in his hands, that takes away. I mean, you're still looking at a team that was in the NIT last year and lost its two best players. So, I think, again, experience is going to matter. They have a chance to get better with that. I think they have a chance to get better chemistry. I think they're going to – I think Archie Miller is going to go into this with a different mindset. I don't think he realized how much motivation was going to be a part of his job and going to be required and going to be constant until the end of the season when he realized that that they basically lost 12 out of 13 and they were kind of a wreck. That he needed to be the guy that was creating the fire for that group. I think he sort of believed that, hey, we're Indiana. These guys should be able to make their own fire. There's no reason that scholarship players at this level shouldn't be able to, just play hard on their own. I shouldn't have to make them play hard. But I think he's figured out that sometimes maybe you do. Sometimes you have to be the guy that lights the fire. So I think all of those lessons learned make a difference. But you're still talking about, they lost the only two guys that average double figures on that team. It's significant. I don't think they've fixed the shooting issues. I mean, like, there's a lot of elements that I think they'll be better at, but I don't know that they'll be great. So, they're going to have to prove it. Does that mean they can't be a contender? No, it doesn't. There are enough pieces that if everything comes together right, they can be an NCAA tournament team for sure. And maybe they can finish top 5 in the league if everything goes right. But a lot has to go right. That's not guaranteed at this point.
Dustin, I know you have to go, so last question for you. Joey Brunk, when Joey Brunk first announced he was coming to Indiana, we had you on. Obviously, you were able to watch him at Butler. And a lot has been talked about him this offseason. He won the offseason conditioning award. It certainly feels like he's going to add a different level of leadership, certainly vocal leadership.
Yes.
But given what you saw on the court at Butler, do you think in our natural fan fervor to talk ourselves into the most idealized version of every player in the offseason, are people overrating or getting overly excited about what Brunk is going to bring on the court? Or do you think he's going to be a really productive player for Indiana next year?
I think he's going to be productive. Do I think he's going to be an all Big Ten center? I don't. I don't think he's going to average 15 a game. But if you get, if you're getting 8 and 5 each from him and Davis, that's productive. That's really productive. You'll take that. And, maybe if you get 8 and 6, I mean, he didn't rebound at that level last year. And that's really, I think, what the physical development is about for him, is getting to the point where he can really rebound the basketball. Because he didn't do that with enough frequency that you want out of a center last year. I mean, Kamar Baldwin, I think, led Butler in rebounding. That's a problem. Basically, when your guard is far and away, your leading rebounder. So he's got to be able to rebound for them. He's got to be at least be able to get 5 or 6. But yeah, I think he can get you 8 points, get you 10 some nights. Maybe on a really good night when he's feeling it, and has a good matchup, get you 12 to 14. Energy is going to matter. The leadership is going to matter. I think the biggest thing is if you're Indiana fans, let yourself enjoy. I think that's the biggest thing. I think Indiana fans have a chance to really enjoy this player because I think he's going to be extremely passionate. He's going to show them some things that this group missed last year. He's absolutely going to, just bleed all out for IU. He is going to give it his all this year. And I think that's something that IU fans should take in and appreciate. So if he's not averaging 15 a game, don't set yourself up for that level of disappointment. Don't tell yourself that he's going to be a dominant center. He's going to be good. He's got really good touch around the bucket. He might be able to extend a little bit, hit the occasional jumper, maybe hit the occasional three-pointer. There are things he's going to be able to do well. He's got to get better defensively. He's got to be a better rebounder. I think he will by virtue of will and desire. But is he going to be a guy that blocks 3 shots a game? No. Is he going to, again, a guy that averages 16 a game? No. He is going to make an impact. He is going to make a difference. He has a chance to be a really big-time Indiana favorite as long as they don't put too much expectation on him and believe he's going to be the next Cody Zeller. He's not.
As long as he provides some vocal leadership and some on-court fire.
Exactly.
That may be all Indiana needs.
Exactly. That is really key. I mean, that if he gets that, he would be doing what Archie Miller asked him to do. So enjoy what he is the best thing that I could say. If anyone is getting too hyped up and thinking, I don't know, man, maybe he's an NBA player and he's the best center in the league. He's not. But he's going to be serviceable. He's going to be productive. He's going to do something, and he is going to make a difference in the locker room. That's really key. I think you can count on that. And Archie Miller is ecstatic about what he brings from a chemistry standpoint, and that is going to be there. So I guess fans have a chance to love him if they want to, and it's there. He's going to be a very likable player. He's not going to be a dominant player, but he's going to be productive. He's going to be effective. He's going to do a lot of things well.
Follow him on Twitter at Dustin Dopirak. Sign up for The Athletic so that you can read all of his articles, Indiana, Purdue, and Butler, as we go throughout the season. Dustin, thank you as always for coming and joining us and providing your insight.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com and visit Alex over at insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.